One of the real joys of making the food programme is meeting people at a particular moment in their lives, hearing about their ambitions, their frustrations, and their future hopes. Of course, these stories don't then stand still. There's constant change with the seasons, markets, even governments. So today, we're returning to 4 stories we've covered before to ask a simple question. What happened next? From the Halloumi or hellim makers in Cyprus dealing with a devastating outbreak of foot and mouth disease, to the fate of 500 kilograms of baby eels stranded in Gloucestershire, England's first commercial olive oil harvest, and the changing fortunes of UK-owned farms in West Africa. I'm Leyla Kazim, and this is the Food Programme. We are in Cyprus and it's really nice and sunny. It is quite cold, but yeah, we're here and we are ready to discover a lot about... 3 years ago, I travelled to Cyprus to report on Halloumi, or hellim as it's called in North Cyprus. These are the instructions written in English to make hellim. Look at this, it says 10 kilograms of sheep's milk, 1 teaspoon of rennet, 1 kilo... The island had recently secured protected designation of origin status for this famous friable cheese. 35,000 tonnes were being exported each year, around 350 million euros worth. The island had recently secured protected designation of origin status for its famous friable cheese. 35,000 tonnes were being exported each year, around 350 million euros worth. But behind the celebrations, there was a debate, or really a pretty serious argument, about what halloumi or hellim should actually be made from. Sheep and goat's milk in the traditional way, or a mixture with mostly cow's milk used by many big producers.
You actually have 2 kinds of halloumi hellim. You have the 100% sheep and goat milk, and you have the mixture.
I spoke to Socrates, then an agricultural officer in the government's Ministry of Agriculture.
If you are going for the mixture, according to the standard, the proportion will be at least 50% of sheep and goat milk. So the maximum you can get there is 50% of cow's milk. But we're having a transitional period, a 10-year transitional period, that is ending next year. So until we reach that transitional period, it's going to be 25% of sheep and goat milk, 75% of cow's milk.
That 10-year transition period, giving Cypriot cheesemakers time to comply with the Halloumi PDO rules, was later extended by 5 years and is now due to end in 2029. The aim is that sheep and goat's milk will eventually make up more of halloumi and hellim than cow's milk. Cyprus still doesn't produce enough sheep and goat's milk to meet demand, and demand keeps growing. Halloumi exports rose from around 39,000 tonnes in 2023 to around 45,000 tonnes a year now. Much of that cheese is made in large factories, but I also met producers working on a very different scale. Meet Pantelis Panteli.
You see a picture of me and the Pope.
Oh my goodness, look at you in your pilot gear with the Pope.
Yeah, Benedict.
Okay, so Pantelis, one-time pilot who met Pope Benedict, now a sheep farmer and halloumi maker on the outskirts of the capital Nicosia. The squawking comes from his children's pet parrot.
My mother-in-law used to make halloumi, and while she was cooking it, we were making notes. When she was testing the temperature with her elbow, we were testing the temperature with a thermometer.
This is fresh halloumi made just 2 days ago.
And if this is the real halloumi, when I put it in the frying pan, it shouldn't produce steam. Oh. If it had 52% moisture, this would be steaming now. Yes, the government says you can make it with 52% moisture. And call it traditional halloumi, by the way, yeah.
What are your thoughts about the PDO? Is it a good thing or...?
It's a disgrace.
A disgrace because Pantelis believes the way halloumi is marketed under the PDO does not allow customers to see that there are different qualities of cheese. They have to list the ingredients, but they don't say how much sheep or goat's milk it contains. He says this is like saying two different types of car are worth the same.
It's like cars. You can have a car for 5,000 euros, you can have one for 20,000 euros. I wouldn't mind that if they would distinguish this is a 5,000 euros Halloumi car, this is a 20,000 euros Halloumi car. But they say everything is excellent. No, it's not excellent and it's not equal.
When I left Cyprus, Pantelis was finding customers for his cheese via social media. Restrictions meant he couldn't export his cheese or sell it through a shop, and he was worried about the future of traditional halloumi. Then the discussion was all about recipes and regulations. Now, 3 years on, farmers have found themselves facing a much more immediate problem.
Hi, Leyla. It's great to see you again. Long time. A lot has changed. The farm, the brand, everything went better than planned.
Great.
And of course, then as you accelerate, you hit a wall. So this year has been crazy from the beginning. It's a challenge. We say life is not boring around the farm.
So talk to me about what's happened this year. What's been the main challenges?
Yeah, it's been incredible this year. It actually started in December 2025 with FMD, foot and mouth disease. Reports of foot and mouth disease up in the northern part of the island. That didn't get a lot of attention. And from what we saw, the government services basically treated it as a separate entity. The Turkish Cypriots treated it as a medical case and basically requested vaccines from the European Union via our government. And they vaccinated. From what I have heard, that's the end of it on that side. Our guys said, no, it's another place. We don't have FMD because they were on the Turkish Cypriot side and we don't recognize them and whatever. But the virus was not informed about this. So the virus traveled. And in, I think, February, we had the first cases on our side. It's like you living in an apartment and, your neighbor has COVID or whatever, and you say, it's him, it's separate from me. No, you're in the same building. They went politically and messed up everything. By February, it was too late.
Since February, tens of thousands of animals have been destroyed, mostly sheep and goats, but also large numbers of pigs and cows.
It's total madness because if they test and they find one single sheep in a farm of 5,000 sheep, not sick, but with antibodies, they kill everything. They kill everything. And we tell them, even if I accept your extreme scenario that you are afraid of everything in the protocols, whatever, since you are scientists and you have vets, check the rest of the flock, and since you insist on killing them, slaughter them and we will eat them. At least we will eat the meat. No, they killed and buried on site or nearby.
Pantelis' flock of 300 sheep were recently tested and found to be negative. However, there's been another knock-on impact to the halloumi industry. The loss of all those sheep and goats has led the government to change the rules on the halloumi recipe again. So rather than producers needing to use 25% sheep and goat's milk at a minimum, they can now use less, 15%, until the end of this year.
That's not a PDO product. PDO is supposed to be unique in this area or this place or this country, and it's the original thing. And if you're the consumer and you see that little orange stamp, you're supposed to trust it and say, oh, okay. But for us, it's become so wide, so loose an interpretation that anything can be halloumi now. You can put 85% of cow's milk, stir it, cook it, that's it. It's a halloumi. You can even get halloumi in big blocks of, I think it's 1.5 kilos, rectangular blocks. Who made that? Whoever made that? Grandma? No. And this means that the trend is for them to, in the end, apply to make this permanent. They will go to the European Union and say, you have this situation, FMD, whatever, make this permanent. And if it's 15%, first of all, the price of the sheep and goats' milk will drop. They don't need them anymore because we have the illegal ones that use powder milk as well, and nobody tests for that. So you can see the trend. It's going to be cows halloumi.
Pantelis Panteli. We put his concerns to the Cypriot government, but nobody responded. So what about Panteli's business? Well, he says things are looking up.
I'm producing more cheeses. I'm making blue cheese, which is basically a Roquefort-style cheese from sheep's milk.
Wow.
And I do, various strengths, up to a strength that I am selling it, and the customer says, how's the taste? And I say, it stinks and it's spicy. And they say, give me 2 pieces.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. So you've expanded your range. I love this.
Oh, yes. We do kefir.
Oh, nice.
Real kefir, just milk. I'm actually scaling down the halloumi now because I want to get into all these wonderful cheeses.
Oh, that's so cool.
There's more to life than halloumi.
What? What do you mean, Pantelis?
What?
Pantelis Panteli, pilot turned sheep farmer and cheesemaker in Cyprus. Last year, the food programme reported on a problem few people could have imagined. 500 kilograms of baby eels being kept alive in tanks in Gloucestershire because they couldn't be exported.
In rows of long open tanks, the fish are resting on the bottom. They look like a jumbled mass of tiny, transparent worms.
It's a story that involves, as Dan Saladino put it in his programme, almost as many twists and turns as the eel's own migration back to the Sargasso Sea. Dan's story began on the banks of the River Severn, watching the annual arrival of baby eels into British waters.
It's approaching midnight on the banks of the Severn, and in the space of a few seconds, the flow of the river changes.
Dan met some of the fishermen who, for generations, have caught baby eels as they drift up the Severn. Years ago, they were harvested for food. Today, however, they are an endangered species, and the eels Dan saw being caught were destined for relocation to river systems where eel populations have declined.
Less than a mile away from the riverbank, inside a warehouse-like building on the side of an A-road, is a specialist facility where 1/2 ton of live glass eels caught from the Severn are being stored. The owner of this business near Gloucester, called UK Glass Eels, is Peter Wood. He's the only exporter of glass eels in the UK. Until Brexit and the UK's departure from the single market, Peter sold glass eels to eel farms and for restocking projects in European rivers in countries ranging from Greece to Germany and Hungary to the Netherlands, none of which is possible since Brexit. There's one destination he's found to send the eels to: Kaliningrad, in Russia. This is for conservation, not consumption, Peter says.
The plan is that it will take some 8 to 12 years before there's sufficient to escape to the sea. Once we've reached that escapement target, it will be possible to harvest some of the fish in the lagoon.
But as well as the historic catch of glass eels for food and the more recent supply of juveniles to eel farms and restocking programmes, there's an illegal trade in glass eels worth billions of pounds. And you did hear correctly, billions of pounds.
They don't look like much, but these eels are as valuable to smugglers as cocaine.
Tourists at Madrid airport were caught with 48 live eels in their checked luggage, heading to China.
Concerns over this international illegal trade is the reason why the UK government recently placed an export ban on the 1/2 ton of glass eels caught from the Severn this spring. The fish Peter Wood was planning to send to Russia.
Tonight is the last night that this business is going to be open.
So with nowhere to go, what has happened to all of these baby eels?
Well, that's a good question.
Andrew Kerr has spent years working to protect the European eel. He's chairman of the Sustainable Eel Group, a Europe-wide organisation that brings together conservationists, scientists and the eel industry.
The stories going around the eel community of Gloucester are that 500 kilos, something like 2 million glass eels, were caught. But as to what has happened to them, there's been very little information.
I mean, how much do eels grow in that time frame?
Growing eels in farms is a relatively new technology. To begin with, you used to lose half of them because the husbandry wasn't really very good. But at the best end of practice now, you're trying to optimize their growth by giving them the ideal amount of food, having the water temperatures right, and then you have to grade them because they don't grow at the same speed. So grading means you take the bigger ones out because eels like to eat each other all the way across the Atlantic, and then when they get into the estuaries and come up the rivers, it's like eating your brother and sister. So these eels will have been fed and kept warm. Some of the bigger ones now might be 1 or 200 grams or 300 grams, something like that. It's a very variable process. But if you can't keep grading, you can't really manage them effectively.
Wow. And so theoretically, if these eels were released into the wild now, would they be able to swim off happily and survive and carry on with their life journey?
The scientists don't really want you to meddle for very long with eel. The longer they're in human contact, the less wild, if you like, they become. And in the programs of translocation, you try and do it within a few weeks. In the programs of restocking, sometimes you grow them on for several weeks, 3 months or so. But you do want to get them released as quickly as possible. So a year and a half on, they are very dependent on human forms for feeding. What would happen if you released them into a river at this stage? Are you just putting fat and protein in the river for the perch and the pike and the zanders, and the cormorants and everyone else to eat? Yes, this is way past the normal time when you're trying to optimize recovery.
Andrew Kerr from the Sustainable Eel Group. A fascinating insight, but I'm still asking, are the eels still there?
You got the key?
Yeah, I've got the key.
Well, Peter, I first stepped into this storage facility of UK glass eels in April 2025, and one thing I didn't expect is they're still here.
If you look into the tank now, I mean, when you were here, the glass eels were just swimming around, really in a sort of torpid state. But now, if you look up the tank, under the feeders, you can see a huge amount of glass eels standing on their tails, climbing over each other, waiting for the food to drop down from the feeder.
What's involved in keeping them alive here? How are they being fed? And also, how much is it costing?
Well, somebody has to come in twice a day to feed the fish. We've got to keep an eye on the machinery, the pumps and the compressors to supply air for them. And of course, I mean, somebody has got to be available 365 days a year to 24 hours to look after the fish. If the power goes off for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, we will lose all the stock.
Dan is back with Peter Wood from UK Glass Eels. So with no way of exporting the baby eels and them costing a lot to keep in tanks, why haven't they simply been released?
We applied to restock the glass eels in the Severn more than a year ago, and this application was rejected.
But you're applying for them to be placed into the river in specific locations?
Yes, initially we wanted to restock at each of the barriers on the Severn. Then there's a barrier at Douglas, there's a barrier at Bayfair, there's a barrier at Holt, there's a barrier at Lincoln.
Isn't it better just to place them where the Environment Agency is saying you can place them?
Well, last year, the proposal the Environment Agency wants us to undertake is to put them where we have already stocked last year. And this doesn't make any sense at all, because by putting them in the same place, you don't increase the eel population. And in fact, the evidence is that you have an increased mortality of the glass eels or the eels that you put back into an area that is already heavily stocked.
Let's just go through some other options that people might be thinking, well, why not, for example, can these eels end up as food? Can you sell them to be eaten?
Well, at the moment, as you see, they're not really big enough to eat. Our business is not actually eating eels. Our core business over the last 50 years has been supplying elvers for stocking.
Okay, another destination that traditionally you would send the juveniles to is Loch Ness in Northern Ireland. Why is that not a possibility for these eels?
Yeah, it's an amazing situation. For 3 years after Brexit, we were able to export the glass eels to Northern Ireland. And then Brussels introduced an implementing regulation for the European Union that prohibits the movement of glass eels or eels into the European Union.
What about the original issue which has resulted in these eels being stuck here, which is that you brought these eels in to export for a restocking program in Russia? The export license was rejected by the UK government. Are you trying still to take that route and apply for export licenses for these eels potentially to go to Russia?
Yeah, I mean, in the project in the Baltic to support the recovery of the eel, there was 250,000 hectares to restock. Compare this to restocking the Severn, which is only 6,500 hectares. I mean, it was a project that was going to make a major contribution to the recovery of the eel. And I still believe this is the correct thing to do.
But are you still applying for licenses, and what's DEFRA's position on that?
We've applied 170 days ago and about 90 days ago for a license to export to Russia, and we are still waiting for a response.
Well, as you say, UK Glass Eels is a business. How much money is involved in this? So how much income were you expecting to get from this restocking project that you no longer are expecting to receive?
The project over the next 12 years was going to, for the local community, was going to be a value of 25 million. And all this has been lost.
If these were to be released into the world now, would they survive?
Oh yes, I mean, this is restocking with juvenile eels like this is nothing new. In Sweden, the whole of the stocking process relies on stocking with these sort of eels, and similarly in Germany.
At the heart of this is the issue that DEFRA flagged up in its rejection of the export licence was the question mark over the ultimate destination of the elvers that are ending up in Russia. Great concerns, they said, in statements they sent to us about lack of guarantee that these were not ending up into the illegal market and eventually as food from eel farms in Asia. Well, are you still convinced that they were ending up in a restocking program in Russia and not ending up in a black market operation and Asian restaurants and tables?
Absolutely. The situation is the price after we have shipped to Kaliningrad, there is absolutely no margin to re-export to Asia. And you can buy glass eels from America for something like $2,000 a kilo. So it's absolute madness to think you want to buy glass eels in the UK and then re-export them illegally when you can actually purchase them from the States for $2,000 a kilo.
Peter Wood from UK Glass Eels. The future of these juvenile eels is still uncertain. The Environment Agency says it assesses all applications for export on a case-by-case basis, and all applications are rigorously assessed to ensure trade is legal and sustainable. The movement of food around the world, imports, exports, it's of course nothing new, but climate change is starting to alter where some of that food can be grown. Olive oil has always been a symbol of the Mediterranean. But last year, I made a programme about a small group of growers who believe warmer weather could make it possible to produce olive oil in England. Hi, Pete.
Hiya, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out.
Here, farmer Pete Thompson has 2 groves with a total of 1,800 olive trees.
We're on a peninsula, we're sticking out into the North Sea, so we've got sea to the north, we've got Hampford Water just here in front of us to the south, and we've got sea to the east, so you get really good light levels. Yeah, we're also the hottest, the driest part of the UK, so it's sort of, if it's going to work anywhere, it'll work here.
Well, I, for one, cannot wait to try your olive oil one day, Pete.
I've tried quite a few times to make it. I've demolished my kitchen at home, and even the tiniest producer in Sicily, they're not pressing it. They're taking it down to the co-op, where they've got a guy that's been pressing olives since he was 5. We don't have an infrastructure at all. So that's the next challenge really, is developing that infrastructure, both for us and for other people, making their oils in the UK.
Pete Thompson showing me his olive groves in Essex. So what happened next? Well, one of the olive growers now has bought and used the machinery needed to press the olives. Meet David Hoyles.
If we want to go to the olives 400 metres up there, what we'll probably do is go in my truck in case it starts raining.
Okay.
Then we can just hop in there, and I've got brollies in there and whatever.
Great. David is a 5th generation farmer based in South Lincolnshire, not far from Spalding. The main crop is potatoes, but they also grow peas, mustard, flax, sugar beet and wheat on rotation.
So we're 2 metres below sea level, the water gets pumped out, very fertile land, and we can grow lots of different crops.
I mean, it's just wild that you're telling me that you grow olive trees 2 metres below sea level.
Well, I think it's wild that we're growing olive trees on this latitude where we're the same as Krakow and Moscow. The northern bit is more of a challenge than being 2 metres.
You talk about it, your face is kind of like, it's kind of crazy we're doing this face.
It is, yeah.
David is now running a new business called the English Olive Company, and he has not started small.
I was going to do a couple of hundred.
Right.
So I was going to drive over to France or Spain, buy a few boxes of trees, bring them back, and then plant them near the house as a bit of a folly.
Okay.
And then Brexit got in the way, and plant health inspection costs.
Yeah.
So I thought, actually, I've got to just go large. And then I realised the cost of the trees. Then I thought, I've got to do this professionally. So then I paused for a bit, did a lot of research, visited a lot of olive groves around Europe, and then pressed the go button in 2023 and planted them in 2024.
Oh my goodness me. How many trees did you plant?
18,000.
And how big were the plants when you were planting them? Yeah.
So I bought them as 1-year-olds, and they're 30 to 40 centimetres tall. So they're like a pencil, and about 30 to 40 centimetres tall.
And you've already harvested?
We had a small harvest last year, yeah.
Okay, from these pencil tall...
Well, then they grew.
Yeah, then they grew quite quickly then.
I think relatively slowly. The trees that we've got here, compared to the trees that are planted at the same time in Spain or Italy, they're probably double the size of my trees. Because they carry on growing in the winter, I'll do nothing for 6 months of the year.
The 18,000 trees, a mixture of varieties, are planted in neat rows across a 25-acre flat field with irrigation pipes running along between them. As we talk, David fixes a few trees that have blown over, and he shows me how he prunes them to help them grow into a shape that will hopefully help them produce more fruit.
So here we're standing at a changeover of varieties. We've got 4 varieties all next door to each other. Look at this one here. Quite tall, quite green, quite lush, very little fruiting sites on it. If we go over to this neighbouring line here...
Wow, quite different.
So
this so many buds on it.
So many buds on it. Wow. And nearly like a silvery colour to the tree.
Yes.
And the leaves, that we're nearly seeing the underside of the leaves. So this variety looks like, the potential on that is monstrous.
Yes, compared to this next row.
And then we go to the next row.
Where there's just like 2 branches on each.
But lots of...
yes, it does.
Lots of flowering sites on it.
So how many litres did you harvest last year?
We only ended up with, of usable stuff, less than 100 litres. I did a little post saying olive oil now available, and literally within minutes it sold out. So then we did another batch the second week that we picked, but very small quantity availability. The books say that until they reach maturity in 20, 30 years' time, you should double your harvest every year. But the weather will dictate that.
Okay, I'd like to see the machine. Back on the farmyard and near the huge stacks of potato crates, there is a shipping container clad in wooden panels with David's olive oil logo. And inside...
So here we've got a small line. This is the only olive mill in the UK at the moment. So the olives come in through those back doors in crates. We tip them into the washing line. And there's a fan that blows leaves and debris. We don't have much of that because we're hand picking, so hopefully people aren't wasting time picking leaves. And then from the washing line, they go into the little olive mill. So this has got a mini olive 100. So this will do 100 kilos of olive an hour.
Next, we taste.
I've got our olive oil here. I've also then got a fairly mild Spanish. And then I've got a fairly peppery Italian.
Fun! Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, what a momentous occasion. First time I've ever trying English olive oil. Maybe in 20 years this will be a much more apparent thing.
I hope it will be.
Yeah. I honestly can't believe I'm tasting English olive oil.
Quite different.
Yes. The heat from the pepperness comes sooner than the previous one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely.
That's what the professionals are really looking for, because the higher pepper means higher polyphenol content.
Oh, right.
And polyphenols are anti-inflammatory. They help with your heart, with your cholesterol. So the more peppery, generally the higher quality.
And the more pepper, the younger
Generally,
the olives.
Yeah. But it's a varietal thing as well. Different varieties are more peppery naturally than others.
So what does the future look like for English olive oil? David believes our climate will never support large-scale production, meaning it's likely to stay a niche product that costs more than imported oils. But there's a growing interest in his olive trees for other reasons.
I've had contact from a guy in Yorkshire who does Wagyu beef, and I didn't realise that they're fed on pumice pellets, so the waste product from the olive production, the pulp. People then dry those in the Mediterranean, and then they get fed to animals, and that's what makes Wagyu beef. They're very expensive to buy in and bring over. And he's like, well, can I have your waste pumice? I'm like, well, I'm just getting the day job sorted first, but in a couple of years' time, I might then invest in machinery that then dries and pellets the pumice, and then we might have a collaboration. I had a company from the South Coast get in touch. They want to buy the pumice for making natural soaps. So there's various other parts of the business that we can develop in the future, but we're just going to concentrate for the first couple of years getting the day job right.
David Hoyles from the English Olive Company in South Lincolnshire. Finally, we're returning to a programme we made last year that went on to win at this year's Guild of Food Writers Awards. It was called Why is Africa Feeding Us? And it was produced and presented by Dan Saladino alongside reporter Jack Thompson in Senegal.
We went to 2 large-scale farms that supply UK supermarkets. By the river that separates Mauritania and Senegal is SCL, which is a joint venture with Barfoot's. It grows sweet corn, green beans and chilies over 1,500 hectares, employing nearly 7,000 people at peak season.
The first farm Jack visited was SCL's, where he met its founder and CEO, Michael Laurent.
Why we choose here Senegal? Senegal, you have plenty of water. I think something like 85% of the water from Senegal River finish in the sea. We have land. We have a lot of people who are seeking for a job. We have sunshine. And we have very good logistic by sea freight.
Michael Laurent. The programme, which is still on BBC Sounds, followed the journey of the sweet corn grown on the vast farm in Senegal, all the way back to the south of England, where it was packed and then made its way to the supermarkets. It was recorded late last year, before the conflict in Iran started, driving up the price of both fertiliser and fuel. So, in a world of rising costs and increasing uncertainty, does running a large-scale veg-growing operation in West Africa still make sense? Julian Marks is Group Chief Executive of Veg Growers Barfoot's. We featured him in that programme last year.
The main changes and challenges since
we talked to Dan have been really driven by weather conditions through the winter, which delivered some very difficult conditions in Spain and in North Africa. And that has meant that Senegal became far more important for us in terms of maintaining continuity. So as soon as we saw issues in Spain in terms of going planting and starting to produce spring crops, the ground was too wet, we couldn't get onto the land. We then used Senegal as our contingency. We extended their season, and it meant that consumers saw no gap in availability despite all those weather conditions. But the second element that we've been dealing with has been on the back of the Iran war and the chaos that has caused in global shipping and logistics. And that caused us some critical issues in terms of the availability of refrigerated containers, because the natural ebbs and flows of container equipment around the world were disrupted. Couple that with storms in the Bay of Biscay, and it made life rather difficult over the winter.
Barfoot's also farm veg in the UK. So have the price rises affected production here more or less than in Senegal, or just differently?
In the UK, we have seen enormous spikes in the price of red diesel, which we use on our farms, and also in fertiliser prices. A large proportion of our fertiliser for our UK crop was already bought in the barn prior to the conflict starting. But where we buy liquid fertilisers through the growing season, we have been affected by that, and we've seen 40-50% increases in cost there. Diesel has been really dramatic, jumping from 65 pence a litre to £1.35, something like that. And that was in our most expensive time of the year when we were establishing our spring-grown UK crops. For Senegal, the issue will be going into next season, so we're buying fertiliser now. There's been a combination of factors here. One is price and one is actual availability. So there has been talk of and some indication of shortages of fertiliser, but we have procured enough to ensure that our season gets off to a good start, because we start planting again in Senegal as we come into the end of August for crops that we'll start harvesting as the UK goes into winter.
In the UK, Barfoot's haven't been as impacted by the price of gas and electricity, as they have invested in green energy and produced the majority of what they need to power their operations. But they can't avoid the increased cost of shipping.
We've seen a doubling in diesel prices. We've seen anything up to 15% fuel surcharges on road freight. We've seen additional container charges on sea freight. They are really significant inflationary elements in our operation, and the challenge then is to pass those on at the farm gate, and ultimately consumers will see higher prices off the back of that. Our farming business in Senegal has some solar energy, but it isn't self-sufficient. We are still net purchases of energy. We've seen some price hikes. We've seen less fuel price increases than we've seen in the UK because of the way that the government in Senegal manages the price of oil. But we have seen significant electricity increases, which affects our ability to refrigerate and chill product.
In Senegal, access to water was one of the key factors to making the farming work. We heard how a lake and a network of canals is also helping local growers make use of the land. But in the UK, the challenge is becoming the opposite.
The difficulties within the UK of achieving planning permission to build winter storage reservoirs, getting abstraction licenses to take winter flow from rivers and streams and then store it for the summer is well documented, how difficult that can be in different areas and dealing with the Environment Agency and the planning authorities. But it's something that we have invested heavily at Barfoot's in, particularly in the last year. We spent £1 million last autumn building a new reservoir to store 125,000 cubic metres of water, which is all abstracted from winter flow. And it is absolutely critical now. 10 years ago, we would have been able to irrigate probably 30 to 40% of what we farmed, and we were reliant on rain for the rest of that. Now we irrigate 90 to 95% of what we farm. The vast majority of the water we use is winter abstracted, so it would just run past us and go out into the sea in the winter. And so building the infrastructure to store that water
is what growers all over the country are trying to do. And it would be fair to say that at the moment, the planning position is variable across the nation, but it is something that as a nation we have to wake up to and start thinking about being what I would describe as dryland farmers rather than those that just rely on lovely storms coming in or rain coming in from the southwest and watering all our crops for us.
So, what's next for the farms in Africa that are supplying so many of our supermarkets? Will we carry on needing them?
In terms of farming in Africa, I think that what we're doing in Senegal remains absolutely critical to that basket of products for out-of-season consumption in the UK and Northern Europe. The ability to flex around the ever-changing weather conditions is really very useful. If we didn't have those sorts of areas, I think that British consumers would have to reinvent their relationship with root vegetables, because these production zones are offering ranges of fresh produce that weren't available when I was a child, and they're offering continuity and quality that we never experienced. So yes, it's a very important area for us to continue working if British consumers want that choice through the winter.
Julian Marks, Group Chief Executive of Global Veg Growers Barfoot's. 4 stories, 4 very different outcomes, but all showing just how much resilience is needed to provide us with the food system we have come to expect. And a reminder that in our globalised food system, what happens in one place can have consequences far away. If there's a food programme story that has stayed with you and you've ever wondered what happened next, we would love to hear from you. Email us at thefoodprogramme@bbc.co.uk. Thanks for listening. This episode was presented by me, Leyla Kazim, and produced for BBC Audio in Bristol by Natalie Donovan.
This Cultural Life from BBC Radio 4.
I will never go into anything so deep like that again.
The world's leading artistic figures reveal their creative influences.
Disobey, disagree, disavow.
I'm John Wilson, and my recent guests have included the sculptor Anish Kapoor, photographer Annie Leibovitz, the actor Kristin Scott Thomas.
It has made me good at telling stories about people who have a secret suffering.
And former children's laureate Frank Cottrell Boyce.
If art's got one function, it's to point to what's wonderful and say, look, this is your world, it's insane.
Listen to This Cultural Life on BBC Sounds.